Hello everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I am going to talk to y'all about my experience at the author event Getting Witchy with It in New Orleans. So this was a particularly special event because I have never been to New Orleans. So this was my first time in the city as well as my first time in Louisiana. And I was really excited to do this event and have the opportunity to explore New Orleans. So this was a little bit different in that I added on extra days onto the trip, specifically so that I could have some specific experiences while visiting and have the focus be broader than just the author event itself. Now, I did drive to this event as I do to all of my events, and that is largely due to the fact that since the primary goal of doing this particular trip was the author event, that means that I have to bring with me everything for doing an author event. So that means all the things that I need for the table space, so the displays, the tablecloths, all of that, and then of course the books. And books are heavy. And how much it would cost to ship all of those books there and hope that they arrive in time or arrive at all, and then the cost of shipping them all back home and hoping they arrive back home, and not only that, hoping that they don't get damaged in transit to the event and to back home, is astronomical. There's just no financial reason for doing something like that. It would just be absolutely ridiculous how expensive it would be for me to ship all of my books to and from this event. I know there are some authors out there that do that for events, as well as there were a lot of authors at this event that just shoved as many books as they could in a suitcase, and there's just so much that could go wrong with all of that, as well as I just have too many book titles in order for that to make any sense. I have over 30 publications now that I bring to events, so that's over 30 titles times inventory. And depending on the title and how well they typically sell, that's anywhere between 3 and 15 copies of each title. Either way, it's way too big of a number for that to make any sense. So I drove. And that means that I had to plan out the travel route. So that means I had to plan the travel route. And because it takes more than about 8 hours, it definitely takes about twice that amount to drive from Chicago to New Orleans, I had to split up this trip into 2 separate travel days. So I headed out on Wednesday and stopped in Memphis, Tennessee as my halfway point. And then on Thursday, I drove from Memphis to New Orleans. Now, also part of the reason why I chose this as my halfway point is that I wanted to make sure that my halfway point was going to be in a major city where I felt safe, where there was going to be food available for me, that I would be able to Uber Eats easily, that would agree with my system. I have IBS and I have a lot of health issues, so ensuring that I have the type of food that I need in order to do this kind of event is very important, because it's really hard to literally drive for an entire day if you're having to go to the bathroom like every 20 minutes. And so having food that works with my body is super important. So I chose Memphis, Tennessee for that halfway point, and it worked out really, really well. I definitely am going to be doing this event again in the future, and I definitely will be taking the same travel route. I think that it worked out really well, as well as I did have a couple of planned stops on my way out to New Orleans, and I did this because that's also part of what I wanted to accomplish with this particular trip, is I wanted to kind of cram in as much as I reasonably could. And so I crammed in as much content creation as I could for my YouTube channel, Alice the Author, where you see this particular video right now, as well as my little Alice06, Alice the Author Instagram account. Having the opportunities to create content for that, as well as doing some work for some of the brand partnerships that I have as an influencer now, taking advantage of all of those opportunities meant that I wanted to make sure that I was really taking advantage of everything that this trip had to offer. And the 2 stops that I made on this trip. The first one was the DeSoto Forest, part of the National Forest Preserve. And it was because I honestly read a Reddit post saying that this particular forest preserve is really beautiful and they highly recommend it. Of course, it came from the perspective of these are people who like do camping and hiking and fishing and all of that outdoorsy stuff, which I'll be honest, does not interest me in the least, that much outdoorsness. But the pictures that they showed were really beautiful. So I was like, oh, this looks like a wonderful opportunity to take some video, take some pictures. So I decided to add it to my trip. Now, unfortunately, there is a running joke that my GPS has nefarious intentions against me, and it did not take me to the DeSoto Forest National Park. It instead led me down a back road and led me to a Masonic Temple headquarters. So I'm not going to lie, that was kind of scary. Thankfully, nothing happened. It was like the middle of the day, and it was a Thursday, so I'm pretty sure nobody was around. Everybody was at work. So I got lucky with that, and I just turned around and got back on the highway, and I was able to eventually find the DeSoto Forest thanks to just happenstancing upon the sign for the exit for it. And it was really beautiful, y'all. I am glad that I stopped and I took some videos and some pictures, as y'all can see in this vlog. Unfortunately, I did not stay very long, and that was because it was over 90 degrees. So that was one of the big eyebrow raises, criticisms, whatever have you, that people had whenever I told them that I was doing this event and this trip, is people would look at me like I'm crazy and be like, why are you going to New Orleans in the end of June, beginning of July? And I had to keep answering, well, I didn't pick when the event was scheduled. That's just when the event was scheduled, and I've just added on this other stuff around doing the event. Unfortunately, that was one of the constraints with this trip, is that it was over 90 degrees every single day. And I don't do well with being outside. I don't do well with that level of UV sunlight. I slathered SPF 70 on myself every single day because I was worried about getting sunburn, even through the windshield and the windows in the car, because that has happened to me in the past. It was challenging, and being outside for any amount of time was pretty miserable. And on that particular day, on Thursday, it was a real scorcher. I basically parked my car in front of this beautiful scenic lake, and I went for a nice little stroll along the bank of the lake. And then I got back in my car, drove down the little road on the bank of the lake, and then once there was no more road, I stopped and I turned around, and that was it. I am a little bit sad that I didn't get as many photos and videos as I wanted, because it was a really beautiful location, but it was just an absolute scorcher. I probably would have gotten heat stroke, to be perfectly honest. As well as it was very clear when I got there that this was very much laid out for people who want to do outdoorsy activities, which of course absolutely makes sense. And there was a limit to roads. There wasn't a whole lot of like actual roads where you could drive your car. A lot of them ended rather abruptly, and it was really obvious that it was like if you were not going on like foot or on four-wheeler or whatever, your car was just going to get stuck and was not intended to be there. I was very limited in how far I could go, as well as I didn't want to make this into a whole like afternoon trek thing, because first and foremost, the goal was to drive and reach New Orleans, and I wanted to get there in a reasonable amount of time in order to give myself a good amount of time to prepare for everything I wanted to do in New Orleans, as well as I didn't want to overexhaust myself. And that was kind of the name of the game with this entire trip, was balancing doing all the things with the stuff, getting all the content, doing all the experiences, but also keeping myself safe, keeping myself healthy, and not overexerting myself. And it was challenging in a lot of ways. After I went to the DeSoto Forest, I also did a stopover in Laurel, Mississippi. Now, this particular town is featured on HGTV as a TV show called Hometown, and the reason why this is relevant is it is like a favorite TV show of my mom. She absolutely loves it. It's a very cute show where they like renovate homes and businesses and other places of note in the town in order to reinvigorate this this small town community. And my parents have gone to Laurel several times now, and they even met the people that do the show. And so I thought, I'm going to be passing through here anyway. I may as well stop there. That'll be fun for me to see it, as well as I'm sure that will make my mom happy. And unfortunately, again, it was over 90 degrees outside, as well as by the time that I reached Laurel, it was past 5 o'clock. And since it's a small town, that means everything was closed. So there wasn't really a whole lot for me to do because it was closed. And then on top of it, it was over 90 degrees. So I really didn't want to get out and just walk around and look at stuff because I'm pretty sure I would have melted and gotten heat stroke. I basically parked, got my bearings to decide what exactly I was going to do. And then I did a couple of loops through Main Street, looked at the cute little buildings, and then I turned around and left. Another part of why my stint in Laurel was cut so short was I don't know what was happening, but in that particular area, there was no self-service. I don't know if it was because of the heat or something was going on that day, or maybe it's one of those areas that just really struggles with cell service, but I was really worried about being able to get back to where I needed to be because my cell phone was not working. So I was trying to text my mom to be like, hey, look, I'm in your favorite place, da-da-da. I was looking forward to sending her photos and all of that, and none of them were going through. And I tried to set my GPS to a couple of the buildings that I wanted to drive past, and my GPS was just spinning. It could not find anything. It didn't know where I was. It was very scary, especially because unfortunately I suffer from dyscalculia, which means that I struggle with math, I struggle with spatial relationships, I have a hard time telling my left from my right, and most importantly, I never know where I am. I don't know the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, and it is very hard for me to understand where I am in the world and understand how to get to where I need to be. So if I don't have a GPS, I may as well be on the moon. I don't know where I am, I don't know how to get to where I need to be. It's a very scary situation to be in. And so thankfully, where I was not too off from the highway, so I was able to kind of double back, retrace my steps, and get back to the highway. And I had to drive quite a while for my phone to finally start reacting again, and then that's when it was just an absolute cacophony, and it was very overwhelming, where then all of my texts went through, and then my mom had sent me a million texts reacting to those texts, and then my GPS finally knew where I was, and it was recalculating, and it was a mess. It was so awful. Dealt with that. Thankfully, I chose the right way, and I was in fact driving the right way on the highway, so yay me for blundering my way to the correct place that I needed to be. So that was definitely a challenge, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that big of a deal. I did end up arriving in New Orleans in the evening. It wasn't super late. It was about somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock at night. I was able to find the hotel really easily. It was really big with the really big logo on it, so that was really nice. And then it was also really nice that their signage for their parking garage was really big and really obvious, so all of that was really easy for me, and I really appreciated that, because there are some hotels that I've been to where it's really difficult to tell which hotel is the hotel I need to be in, as well as sometimes it's really confusing to figure out where their guest parking is. So I was really grateful that that was really easy to figure out. Unfortunately, the parking situation was, I'm just gonna come out and say it was terrible. In terms of the actual concept of parking and the logistics of being in the hotel, fantastic. It was super easy. I was able to park my car really close to the elevators, and the elevators led directly into the hotel. Super simple. What was terrible about it is that this parking garage was literally a concrete box. There was zero airflow. It was completely sealed. It was over 90 degrees outside. Even at 8 o'clock at night, it was still over 90 degrees outside. It was probably over 100 in that parking garage because there was zero airflow and it was just so hot. And so I was a literal hot mess, y'all, unpacking all of my stuff out of the car and bringing it up to my hotel room. I felt the level of disgusting I felt after I got all of my stuff unpacked into the hotel room. I have never wanted to take a shower more in my entire life. It was pretty awful, but thankfully it was something that I only had to do, well, technically 3 times. It was thankfully not a thing that I was going to have to do over and over again on the trip, so I was grateful that I was able to just do it and get it done with and then not have to worry about it for a minute. Did the rundown, got myself some food, had a shower, went to bed, and that was really a big part of the plan with this. Was I also wanted to make sure that the days that I spent traveling, that was like the only focus, that I didn't have anything that I needed to like, oh, I gotta arrive by this such and such time for this thing that I planned and because I knew I was going to be exhausted and I knew there was no way I was going to know for sure when I would arrive in New Orleans, just with the different stops I wanted to make, with all of the stops I had to make for gas, for going to the bathroom, for getting food, whatever have you. Plus the universe can throw us chaos curveballs. You never know what kind of closures, slowdowns, traffic jams, car accidents, construction, whatever can happen. So I wanted to basically give myself the grace of this whole day is just for getting there, and that's it. And Friday was my first real day in New Orleans. That was when I woke up, I was in my hotel in New Orleans, and I was ready to get my adventure on. And Friday was when I planned all of the main things that I wanted to do while I was in New Orleans. And a big part of this was because it just so happened that all the things I wanted to do were all within a couple blocks of each other, which was perfect. The first big thing that I did was I visited the St. Louis Cemetery. So this is one of the most famous above ground cemeteries in New Orleans. I was really excited to visit it. I've always wanted to see one of these above ground cemeteries, and I was extra excited to learn that this particular cemetery was the most famous one, and it had a lot of big name burial sites, as well as, of course, the famous Marie Laveau. All of that was super awesome, and I took an Uber from the hotel to the cemetery because that was a bit of a hike. And again, a big part of this is energy conservation, with making sure that I wasn't overexerting myself, because remember, it was over 90 degrees every day I was there. And as you can see from this vlog, yes, I did dress up every day. Was my outfit choice practical for walking around in a cemetery in 90-degree heat? No, absolutely it wasn't. I was on a mission. I had very specific goals that I wanted to meet, and so I kind of had to work around those goals that I wanted to meet, and that meant making sure that if I was too hot, to remedy that, to go into a shop, to go into a building, take an Uber instead of walking too far, all that kind of stuff, because keeping myself healthy and safe was paramount on this trip. Can't really do the author event if I'm not healthy and safe, and that'll come into play later with this. But I had a blast at the cemetery. It was so amazing. It was so cool seeing all of the beautiful architecture of these tombs, and it was kind of a double-edged sword in that I was initially disappointed that you are required to join a tour group in order to be allowed in these cemeteries. That they made that a rule back in, I believe it was 2016, due to a lot of horrible things happening, just unfortunately bad people ruining it for everybody else. And so I was disappointed with that, because normally when I want to do like paranormal investigations like this, I like to be by myself, because I don't really want to be beholden to what other people are doing, as well as I don't want to deal with other people, for lack of a nicer term, being stupid. It's the frustrating thing whenever you watch a ghost hunter show is they're all jumping around and running around and yelling and screaming, oh my god, did you hear that? Oh my god, did you feel that? And it's like, no, because you're yelling and I can't hear anything. I was worried about that I wasn't going to be able to have an experience due to having people around me potentially reacting to things, potentially running amok or whatever. So I readjusted my expectations and knew that I was not going to be able to do a paranormal investigation, which made me sad. So instead I readjusted and I was like, okay, this is instead going to be be a historical learning experience. I'm going to put my learning hat on, which I also, y'all, I am a big history buff. I love learning. So that was going to be my goal, was I was going to do a lot of learning, and most importantly, I was going to get a lot of footage of walking through the cemetery and just really capturing these beautiful graves and the architecture and just everything that had to offer. And you know what? If I happened to capture something on camera, that would just be the icing on the cake. Unfortunately, I did not capture any paranormal activity on camera. I had to basically just ignore any sort of sound. There was no way that I was going to be able to sort out any sort of EVPs due to that there were multiple tour groups going at the same time in the cemetery, so there was no way to decipher what was real people talking and what was potentially an EVP, as well as I had to really be judicious in, is that like a figure moving or is that just a person from another tour group? And I looked through the footage and there just was a whole lot of nothing. It was fine, and I had a really great time, and the tour guide was so much fun. Oh my goodness, he gave us so many great facts. He was so much fun, and funny enough, he was homegrown from Michigan, Midwest, and he transplanted to New Orleans because he just loves the city so much. And it was just so cool while I was there, just the amount of people who are transplants from different places who ended up in New Orleans and they just fell in love with the city and just decided to never leave. And his one rule was that he didn't want us to video the tour. And that was Captain Obvious, because it's like, if the whole tour is videotaped and put up on YouTube, why would anyone come and pay to do the tour? And I reassured him, I'm like, that is not what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna mute it. I'm gonna put voiceover. I'm gonna like chop it all up. I just want to take video of cool stuff. And he was really awesome about it. He was really nice about it. I chatted with him for a bit after the tour. He was just absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend, absolutely do sign up for these cemetery tours. They are very much worth it. They are so much fun. I'm really glad that I decided to just reset my expectations and to just jump into it. And the other part of it was, especially since it was an organized tour, people were on their best behavior. My fears of people reacting and being stupid were thankfully completely unfounded, and it was just an absolutely lovely time. And conversely, I wanted to make sure that I was also not that person, that annoying YouTuber being in people's way and hogging all the good selfie spots. And so I made sure that I was at the back of the tour so that I could take my time with getting video and do my best to not get people in my shots for protecting their right to privacy, as well as a lot of the shots just look better if there aren't a bunch of people just kind of standing around and stuff. I felt like it was just a win all around. After the cemetery tour, I had a reservation at the Apothecary. So this was the vampire bar that I had seen on Instagram and I was very excited about. I made a reservation and I ended up getting there early because I wasn't sure when exactly the tour would conclude versus how long it would take for me to walk from the cemetery to the Apothecary. So I was a bit early, but they were totally fine. They were not busy when I arrived. So I basically had free reign. It was pretty amazing, honestly. They were so cool. I had an absolute blast. I honestly think this was probably one of my favorite things that I experienced while I was here overall. I originally thought that it was just a bar, but they actually have a full restaurant experience for both lunch and dinner. And it was, oh my God, y'all, it was so delicious. Oh my God, it was so good. Of course, I did the whole kitschy thing. The whole thing that initially got me excited to go there in the first place was that they serve wine in blood bags. So that was really cute and that was really fun. Just as a note, I would say if you decide to go and have that experience, it can be a little challenging to drink the wine out of the blood bag just because it is a literal like medical blood bag. So when you get past the halfway point, you have to kind of shove the wine like up the blood bag toward the straw or the IV tube essentially in order to get the rest of it. So just keep that in mind. I would definitely go again. I would definitely get the blood bag again because it was just such a fun experience experience, but if I were to have more than one glass of wine, I would definitely have just a normal glass after the initial blood bag, just because it is a little bit challenging once you get past the halfway point. The food was so delicious. I had already looked at the menu prior to even going on the trip. I planned everything out. And so I got the charcuterie board, as one does, and that was really tasty and refreshing. And I also got the bone marrow because, y'all, I am a big fan of bone marrow. It is just so delicious. I just, any opportunity I have, if that's on the menu, I'm getting it. And they did such an amazing job. It was so delicious. It was so buttery and good. And then I also loved that they had these little like caviar bubbles on top. So that was a really fun touch. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, they were out of the quail. So I initially for my entree wanted the quail dish, but they were out of it. So I went with my tried and true favorite, salmon. And whoo, it was divine. It was so buttery. It was so perfectly cooked. It was just so good. And I felt so bad because other than the bone marrow, I demolished, just 100% ate all of it. But the charcuterie board and the salmon, I did leave a bit on my plate. And part of that was because I just had ordered just so much food. There's only so much room in my stomach, but I ate as much as I could without making myself sick because, oh my goodness, it was so delicious. And I just wanted to savor every single bite. And the staff there were so welcoming. They were so much fun. And they were also just so excited to see me. I thought that was just an absolutely like big part of the experience for me, was they were just so excited to have me there. Of course, they had no idea who I am. It wasn't like I'm a famous person or anything like that kind of situation, just that they were very excited to have a cosplay person like me there, and that I let them know, hey, I do want to take like some photos and some videos and stuff for my Instagram and my YouTube channel and stuff. And they let me pick where I wanted to sit. So I sat by this beautiful window where I was able to people watch, and just the lighting was gorgeous. Just everything about it was so perfect. And then my waitress, and oh my God, y'all, she was an absolute doll. She was just so much fun. She then offered, hey, there is a thing that we do here where you can do a shot with your bone marrow bone. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so stupid and ridiculous. I need to do that. Yes, please. And unfortunately, I know I'm gonna get so much flack for this in the comments. I know, absolute heresy in New Orleans. I don't like bourbon. I'm sorry. I know. I don't like bourbon. I don't like whiskey. I don't. I'm very much like, I like rum. That's my jam. That's my ish. I like rum. When she was like, oh, well, what about rum? And I'm like, now you're talking. Now you're speaking my language. And so it was dark Captain Morgan rum, and just that mixing with the bits and bobs that were left in the bone marrow bone. And we did the shot luge style. It was so good, y'all. It just added a whole other like level to the bone marrow and to the rum, just mixing together. It was such a cool flavor, just taste profile, as well as it was just such a fun, silly experience. So I really enjoyed that, and she was so awesome. She helped me set up my phone so that I could capture it. It was just such a wonderful, great experience. And then after that, she took me on a tour of the whole establishment, just all of these cool little places that they have. They have this big, beautiful fairy garden where they have carnivorous plants, which is so cool. They have like actual pitcher plants, which, y'all, are really hard to take care of, and they had so many, and some of them were really big. I was really surprised. They were so cool. And she took me up to the seance room where they do seances and they do palm readings. They also do custom vampire fangs where you can get vampire fangs made for you. Oh my God, it is just such a great experience, and I'm so glad that I went there and I was able to really enjoy it. So props to them. Absolutely highly recommend. And then after that, I decided to pop into the voodoo shop that I had earmarked that I wanted to check out, because that was another thing that I wanted to do. Is I had always wanted to go to a voodoo shop. Voodoo is a closed spiritual practice, and that means that if you are not part of the community, you cannot be a part of this spiritual practice. There have been stories of people who have attempted to do voodoo and they are not part of the community, and bad things have happened to them. Please be respectful of cultural and spiritual practices. it's always best to err on the side of caution. I had no interest in like doing anything to like try to ingratiate myself in that. I am an outsider and I respect that. It was more so that I just wanted to see what it was all about. That's something that I've just been curious about. I've read a lot about, and I love learning about different cultures and different spiritual practices. So it was something that I just wanted to experience and see. Now, when I say that, it was literally me just going into a voodoo shop where they just sell all sorts of bits and bobs. It wasn't like there was some sort of presentation going on or any sort of like ritual going on or anything like that. I didn't witness anything like that. It was simply just going into the shop and looking at everything. And so that was a really fun experience, and I'm really glad that I got to do it and that it was just such a like non-event, if you will, that it was just a very casual, like, I'm here, I'm looking at things, and I had a lovely time, and now I'm going. And that was exactly what I wanted that experience to be. So Friday was absolutely such a fantastic day. My parents have been celebrating their 40-year wedding anniversary for it seems like the past month, which good for them, absolutely, as they should. But for part of it, they love New Orleans. They've been there several times, in fact, to celebrate other wedding anniversaries. And a big thing that my family enjoys is being able to experience things like for the first time, where it's me or my brother's first time going to a place. My parents really like experiencing that with us. So my parents flew out to New Orleans and met me Friday night so they could experience New Orleans with me, experiencing it for the first time. And Saturday was kind of the big day that I had experiencing New Orleans with my parents. Friday night, after all of my adventures solo, I did go out to dinner with my parents, and we went to the Redfish Grill, and oh my goodness, we had Ike as our server, and he was just a blast, y'all. He was telling us about all the different movies and TV shows he's been in. He was just hyping us up. It was a party. It was a party, y'all. It was so great. Oh my goodness, he was so much fun. The food was fantastic. then Saturday, we had a full day with that. We wanted to go to the Palace Cafe Jazz Brunch. And then for dinner, we went to Brennan's. Now, this is where my trip takes a bit of a turn, where unfortunately Saturday night at like 3 in the morning, I got violent food poisoning. Like, y'all, it was so bad. It was so bad. And I'm fairly certain I got the food poisoning from the Palace Cafe, just based on the timing, as well as based on some TMI stuff that I won't share here about the fashion in which I got sick. It was so unfortunate that I got sick, and it happens. It's unfortunately just whenever you go out to eat anywhere, it is a Russian roulette possibility that you can get food poisoning for any number of reasons, and unfortunately I did, and it really sucks. But regardless, I did still have a really fun time. I really did my best Saturday, because after we went to brunch, I started having really bad IBS symptoms, and I really kind of, as the day went on, was kind of struggling through, and my stomach ballooned up really bad, y'all. That's another symptom of IBS, where your stomach just bloats up really bad. But I fought through it. I was able to go to Café du Monde, which was another big one off my to-do list, a big thing I wanted to do. So I got the famous beignets, and they were delicious. So good. They were so hot. Oh my goodness. I like burned my hand. I did not expect them to be so piping hot, but they were delicious. Really grateful that I got to experience that. And then we just walked around the French Quarter. And unfortunately, because it was raining that day, we didn't really get to see a lot of the artists and musicians, which was something that I wanted to experience. But not every trip is going to go completely perfectly as planned. And that's okay. I still got to experience a lot of cool stuff. I got to see a lot of the cool architecture. And at the end, we did get to see some of the artists braving coming out after the rain had kind of stopped for the day. So that was really fun. It was also really nice spending some time with my parents and just having this experience with them. I also stopped in this cafe that was super adorable. I specifically looked it up. It was called Café Sucre. The first thing the review said was that it was the most Instagrammable cafe, and I was like, ooh, I'm there. And I got myself a really tasty coffee there. I got myself some macarons. It was really cute. It was a great little place for us to stop, get some air conditioning, hang out for a minute, because we did a lot of walking on Saturday. A lot, y'all. And that was, again, one of the things with conserving my energy and just putting my health and safety first and foremost, is that unfortunately with my disability, I've been having to learn that there is only so much walking that I can do when I go on trips and do events and stuff like that, that it is a thing that compounds. I have hip dysplasia, and before I got laid off from my job, I was on a medical journey to get an official diagnosis for EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a degenerative joint disorder. By the end of Saturday, I was hurting, y'all. It was really hard for me to walk. My limp was becoming really significant, and it's just an unfortunate reality that I've been having to learn to live with, to learn to work around, all of that. So just doing my best. But I'm really glad that I did it, because that was the big mantra that I had for this trip, is that I was going to quote unquote suffer a bit. I was going to be sore. I was going to be tired. My disability was going to flare up. It was going to be hard, but I wanted to make sure that I made the most of everything that I could, because I only get this shot to do this right now, that it's not something that I can just come back another day and do. Another one of the fun little stops that we made was at Pat O'Brien's. This particular bar is one that my dad actually, back in his heyday when he worked for Arthur Andersen, that him and his coworkers had a party at, so it was really fun listening to him reminisce about that, and we had a couple of drinks there. It was really cute. It was really fun. We had a really great day, other than me getting sick, obviously. By the time that it was the evening and we finally had dinner at Brennan's, y'all, I felt so ill, but I was determined to power through it and do it anyway, and the food was so delicious, and I ate as much as I could, but but at that point I was just really struggling because I was starting to become nauseous. And I feel like that's really a testament to how good the food was, that despite feeling so ill, I was like, I want to keep eating this. It's so delicious. And then unfortunately that evening I got really, really sick. And a thing that unfortunately I've started experiencing now is when I get food poisoning, because of how violently my body reacts, I get esophageal damage. This happened back in 2023 where I was very close to having an esophageal tear and I had to go to the hospital, and that can be life-threatening and it was very scary. This time I just had an esophageal abrasion, which is where the stomach acid was so intense that it just burned my esophagus and it really, really messed me up. It was awful, y'all. Unfortunately, then Sunday, which was the author event, I was messed up. I was so messed up, y'all. And so I let the event coordinators know, hey, I am really going through it today. I'm just going to do my best, but I just wanted to give y'all a heads up. And they were really awesome and really understanding about it. I was really grateful for how they just really took it in stride. And one of the big things was that at the beginning of the day, my voice was just destroyed. I sounded like a smoker who'd smoked like 2 packs a day every day for the past 30 years or something, just from the strain and from my esophagus being burned and all of that. It was really painful to talk and my voice was just awful. But thankfully, as the day went on, it got better. It took a while. It took about a little over a week for my esophagus and my voice to fully properly heal. It was rough, but I made it through. I sucked it up and I made it through. And part of the agreement of my parents coming to experience New Orleans with me was that they did offer to help me with load in and load out, which, especially since I got sick, I was so grateful for their help with that because it was rough. I basically woke up at 3 in the morning, got sick, and then did not go back to sleep. And load in was at 8 a.m. sharp. I was really grateful to them that they helped me. And what load in entails is that's when I get out my carts and I fill them up with all of my bins of books, with the tablecloths, with the display racks, with other whatever their stuff that I might need. For this particular event, they have it where everyone only has 1 table. You can't pay more money to get like 2 tables or a full booth space or anything. That's just what you get and that's it. Thankfully, this particular event, they did have the full-size tables, so all of the tables are 6 foot long, but the width of how many inches the table is wide can differ. And so at the Kansas City event that I did back in February, the tables were too narrow for my book displays, so I had to bring my own table to switch out. And so I did end up bringing my own table to this event as well because I wasn't sure what the situation was going to be like, but thankfully I didn't end up needing it, so that was one less thing that I had to schlep back and forth for load in and load out. And so my parents just helped me with the load in situation, just helping me literally schlep the stuff from my hotel room to the event space, and then I did set up by myself. And a big part of that is because it's one of those things where it would take more effort to explain how to do my setup instead of me just doing it myself. Then my parents went and they spent the day enjoying New Orleans, hanging out together, celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, all that good stuff. I got all set up. I started to go around, and this is a big goal that I set for doing these specific author events, is going around and meeting the other authors there, introducing myself, and just kind of ingratiating myself into this community, because that is so important. Is not only do you want to build your audience and build community with your readers, you also want to build community with your fellow authors, because you're going to be seeing them a lot if you regularly do events, and you want to make sure that you have people that are going to recognize you and be supportive and help you out when you need it. And so I had a lot of fun meeting the other authors there, talking about their books, just doing the whole networking thing. It's just really interesting to see the range with these author events of people where that they have their very first book out. They're so excited. They're so proud of it. Some of them, this is even their very first author event they've ever done, ever. Which, side notes, I personally recommend doing a small local event before doing a big event like this as your first ever author event for a variety of reasons that I talk about in my other videos, but go them for being brave and doing a go big or go home style with their very first time, versus there are also a lot of really well-known authors at these events where they've been doing this for decades. They have their big audiences who just show up en masse to just buy their new book and just absolute beeline for their booth, and they don't care about anything else. Like, it's incredible to see that range. And then of course everybody in between. I'm definitely an everybody in between there. Seeing the range of different people at this event is really refreshing and fun to watch, to see how everybody comes together and interacts, and how the readers react to different readers and why they choose different booths over others and all of that. So it's just, I always see everything as a learning experience. How can I continue to grow? How can I continue to learn? How can I continue to do my best to reach my audience, to give my readers what they want, and to set myself up for success at these events? Because this was the Getting Witchy with It in New Orleans author event, I decided to take it upon myself to go with the theme with my cosplay, and decided upon a variation of a witch cosplay that I had done a couple years ago for Halloween. I like to celebrate Halloween with Brian and Maria, and of course I love dressing up for that. So I did something that was kind of similar to what I did a couple years ago with some variations. I do like to make sure that I'm not always doing the same cosplays over and over again. I like to keep evolving them, adding new pieces, trying out new styles and things like that. And I feel like this cosplay went over really, really well. It really helped attract people to the booth. People were really excited about it. I got a lot of compliments on it, all that good stuff. And that is a big part of my branding and a big part of my strategy, is using a big flamboyant cosplay to encourage people to come over to my booth. Because it's like, that's the hardest part, is getting people over to your booth. Once you get them there, you can interact with them, you can get them interested in your books. It's the hardest part is attracting them in the first place to your booth, and having those cosplays to attract people really, really helps. I was very excited that a lot of other people also chose to dress up, and it was really fun to see how other people interpreted the theme of witchy and what it means to them to be dressed up in a witchy type fashion. So it was really fun seeing all the different interpretations of that, just seeing all the different things that people chose to decorate themselves with. I had a lot of fun seeing that. And the different readers that I interacted with at this event, I made a lot of new readers and fans. I'm really excited that I really feel like I met my goal of expanding my audience at this event. I really do feel like I have some new readers who are going to be fans of my work and continue to support my work, as evidence that my book sales have continued to increase online since I did this event. So I definitely think goal achieved. And it was just really fun to interact with everyone and to find out about the different things that people enjoy reading and why they enjoy reading the things that they do, the things that captured people's attention. And it's always interesting to see which books do really well at different events, because it's always an adventure. It's hard to anticipate which books are going to do well at different events. There have been plenty of times that I expect a certain book to do really well, and I am completely blown out of the water with how wrong I am. So it was no surprise that, of course, in New Orleans, my vampire novel, Succumb to Darkness, did the best, because of course it did. I would have been absolutely shocked if I had not sold as many copies of Succumb to Darkness as I did. It was immensely popular. People were very excited about it. I'm really glad that I made the choice to bring the Succumb to Darkness banner for my table, because doing this event, I did learn from the Kansas City event that there's really only room for one banner with my table set up doing this particular type of event. So I made the choice to bring just the Succumb to Darkness one, and I'm really glad I did, because it captured a lot of attention. A lot of people came across the room just because of that banner. And I knew that because it was literally people pointing at the banner and then just walking at it and being like, what is this? I need to know what this is. This looks great. And the second I said vampire, the amount of people that were just like, shut up and take my money. Amazing. It was so amazing. That was was absolutely a success. A lot of copies of Succumb to Darkness were sold, and that was also a reality of this event that I learned at Kansas City, is that these people are serious about buying books, y'all. Oh my goodness. There are people that bring carts, like the carts I have for doing load-in, okay? Those big carts. They bring them to drag around all their book purchases. They buy that many books, they need a cart, and some of them even fill up the cart and then go to their hotel room and empty the cart and come back. I need y'all to realize how many books that is, 'cause that is wild. Absolutely wild. And so because of that, because this event is very centered around people are here to buy books, that is the entire purpose of the event. People run out of money. That happened frequently where people would come to my booth and they were very excited about my books, especially Succumb to Darkness, but they had already run out of money. So then there were a lot of people that took business cards, took pictures of my books, and I also had the postcard advertisements for Succumb to Darkness to give out, and a lot of those were taken, and I've seen an uptick in those sales online. And so I definitely think once those people that had run out of money at the events then later came by and were able to make those purchases online after the fact. That is a thing to really consider when doing these events as well, is don't necessarily be disappointed with the sales that you get at the event, because you never know what sales can be had after the fact online depending on the circumstances of the event. And that was really indicative of this event, that a lot of people needed to refresh their piggy banks a while after the event. The other book that did really well, and this is the one that was surprising for me, was The Asylum. So this is one of the art books that Brian and I did together, where Brian put together a series of photos from one of his photography sessions with Nina, and then I wrote a short story about the old Bedlam Victorian asylums to go with it. It is one of the scariest stories that I've ever written, and people were just drawn to it. They would see the cover, they would pick it up, and they would be like, "What is this all about?" And I'd be like, "This is the scariest story I've ever written." And they're like, "Fantastic, I'll take it." That was really the star of the day that was surprising, was that that particular book did as well as it did. I also sold copies of Love of the Sea. That was the one that was also not quite as surprising, because that's just kind of my standby book. That's one that always does well. It's in my top 3 bestsellers. And then of course Geisha Hands is my other one that I was not surprised that did well. Succumb to Darkness, Love of the Sea, and Geisha Hands are my top 3 bestsellers. They always sell at events. If I have an event that isn't a big goose egg, those are the 3 that always sell. And I did have some other books sell as well. And I also did sell some of my romance novels, Tearing Down the Wall, Freya's Baby Shattered. But it is important to note that it's so funny that my romance novels don't do as well at these events that are billed as romance novel events. However, I think in this case, it's because I'm using the strategy of being different rather than being better. So it's this idea of that everyone else there, for the large part, is selling only romance novels. There are other multi-genre authors there, and the requirement is you have to sell romance novels. You can sell other stuff, that's fine, but you have to have romance on your table, which I did. But the fact that everybody's going around and seeing all these romance novels, and then they come to my table and they see other stuff, it stands out and they get excited about the other stuff. That is a thing that I now anticipate going forward with these events, is that people are likely to be more excited about my other novels than my romance novels at the romance novel event, which is kind of funny, but it is what it is. Thankfully, my romance novels do really well online, but it's just always so interesting to see the breakdown of what books do well at different events. Overall, it was a really great event. I sold a lot of books. I was really happy that I met the goals that I had for this event, which was I wanted to make sure that I sold a certain threshold of books, as well as I wanted to make sure that I did a ton of networking with the other authors there and with my readers and growing my audience and all of that. I met all of those goals with flying colors. I will say this event was not profitable. I did not cover the cost of the table fee and the cost of the hotel and the travel costs of driving to and from New Orleans. I did not add in the cost of doing all the other stuff that I did while I was there, because that was affected relatively not tied to the event, so I'm not tying that into the overall cost, but it cost me far more money to do this event than I made. However, I knew that was going to happen going in, and that was fine, because first and foremost, my goal with doing these events is I want to expand my audience. I want to reach new readers. I want to expand into new markets with different locations, and the best way to do that is to pack up and do it in person. And I feel like I am really meeting those goals, that I'm really starting to see new growth in my readership, and so that is the most important thing. And this is definitely a long-term goal. It's something I'm going to have to keep doing, and hopefully it will continue to grow as expected. Monday was the day that I planned on driving out from New Orleans, and I planned this out so that Sunday after the event, I wanted to be able to have it where I didn't have to pack up and head out immediately. So my parents came back once the event was over, and they helped me do loadout, which is where it's just the opposite. It's you tear down the booth, then pack everything up, and then we brought everything out to my car. And so we did this where we packed up all of the books and tablecloths and just all of that stuff and only put that in the car. And that's because that's all the biggest, heaviest stuff. And so that really helped that I didn't have to do that by myself, so that on Monday I could sleep in a little bit, have a shower, have a food, get all my personal stuff together, my clothes and all of that stuff, and then finish packing up the car, which was only a third of the time that it normally takes because all the books and tables and things were already in there, and then head out. So then Monday was the reverse, where I went from New Orleans to Memphis and stayed at my hotel for the night. So I did stay at a different hotel on Monday than I did on Wednesday, and that was by design. The one that I stayed at on Wednesday was literally right downtown, right in the thick of everything, and that was because, again, I wanted that content opportunity. Whereas the drive home, Monday and Tuesday, was literally, we're just driving home. We're just going, we're not stopping for anything, we're not worrying about content, we don't care, we're tired. And that was how I planned it out, because that's how I always am with every event, with every trip, is once it's time to go home, that's all I care about. I just want to go home. And so that's what I did. So I got a cheaper hotel that was a little bit more out in the suburbs of Memphis. It was a little bit cheaper, and it was literally just for me to just be there, eat a food, take a shower, go to bed, wake up, drive. And that was literally it. And then Tuesday, I drove from Memphis all the way back home to Chicago. It was a long drive. It was hot. It was exhausting. And of course, finally, when I'm not even kidding y'all, only 10 miles from my home, there was massive road construction. It was bumper to bumper traffic. It took an extra hour to get home because of that. It was just absolutely miserable. It was one of those like, well, of course this is going to happen sort of things. I'm so close to the finish line, and of course I have to be thrown a chaos curveball, but it was fine. It was just trying my patience, which in the grand scheme of things is the least terrible thing that could happen. I got home, I was fine. I was able to unload my car, have some dinner, get hydrated, and have the best sleep in my own bed. Oh my goodness, y'all. This entire trip was an absolute whirlwind. It was so much work. It was so exhausting, but I had the best time. I am so glad that I did it. I feel like this really prepped me for some of the big events that I still have ahead of me. I'm going to be doing the Bookworm Ball in August. I'm going to be doing the Getting Witchy with it in Salem, Massachusetts in September. And then I am going to be doing the big Enchanted Kingdom Ball in November. And then I'm going to be closing out the year with the romance author event in Iowa City. So I've got a lot of big events ahead of me, but I'm really excited and it's going to be so much fun, so much effort. In the meantime, I've been resting, catching up on everything, and editing this vlog for y'all. So I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all felt like you were able to come along with me on this journey, and I can't wait to do this again in the future. So I want to thank y'all so much for watching. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, and if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.